right? I think that started it. Okay, and thank you.
Still printing, but here's your originals. There's 2 copies, and then there'll be 3. Okay, there's 5 coming.
Yes, I've got a few people that want it here at the moment. So if you two will just look off the same one for a second, and we'll look at this front one. So let's all read through. Actually, first I want to hear one of your strengths as a writer and one of your weaknesses as a writer, just because I'm nosy like that. So tell me, what's something you're good at?
I'm not really good at writing, but I find it easier when I know the topic. And I've read it more than once, and then when you read back at it, read it over again, it makes sense and you can edit it.
Okay, so the more you know before you start writing, the easier it is for you.
I have a hard time finding what to say.
Okay, I think you're not alone there. Andy, something you're good at. If you can't come up with it, I will, because I handle it.
I can't say anything I'm particularly good at.
I knew you would say that. It's not true.
Everybody wait for Mr. Johnson.
Seriously?
Joel's obsessed.
I'm obsessed. I'm a little freaked out. But. Alrighty. Okay, Andy.
Open his door.
Andy has an amazingly dry, glorious sense of humor which comes through in his writing.
He really
and it's
does.
Delightful. So there you go. I found yours for you. Alright, Carolina. Sorry. Something you're good at.
Probably like finding a wide range of topics, like being able to think of lots.
Lots of different ideas. Okay. Very good.
I don't know if this is good or not, but I can be very, very succinct.
Right. So we're the ones like, what? It's just a page. Alright, that is not a bad thing. In fact, I have a whole other packet on cutting out stuff. So a whole nother packet. No, we're not doing that packet. I just have it. It exists. Luke's bringing it in the delivery truck. Alright, something you're good at. There's nothing at all. You still haven't come up with anything since last time we did it? Oh,
Wait,
yeah.
so do these have to do with something with, like,
With writing. Yeah. Clearly, you would be good at writing about Mr. Johnson. So we're just going to pass by that one. So. Alright, something you're good at as a writer.
I don't really think I'm very good at writing at all. Like,
There's nothing that you like
it's
at
the
all.
reason we're all
I mean,
here.
True.
I like if it's kind of like a story, I guess. I
Yes.
like writing about that, but I'm really bad at kind of like what he was saying, like figuring out which words to use. And I'm really bad at like punctuation.
Right. And a lot of what we're doing today is words and punctuation, so that will be helpful for you. But I think you're right. Stories are easier to write than essays because we've heard stories from day one, and it's the pattern that our minds naturally fit in. So one of my goals today is to kind of show you the pattern of essays, because once you get that pattern, it really does help with writing them. Bethany?
Oh no.
Yeah, well, you are invisible.
I like writing ethnographies.
Writing.
Ethnographies.
Define.
Like when you study a specific culture and you get involved with it.
Okay, so you need to take my husband's geography class, because that's what their whole big paper is on. Pick a geography, ethnic location, and study every component of it.
They were saying like, for us, since
Hi, are you here for the writing class?
Candy needs a cup because he doesn't want to keep going to the water fountain.
because
And Anya's crying because there's no one in her cup.
I'm not a cow.
but we're like, our English teacher at CBCC was like, well, culture can be like a big culture, but if you're like a group of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Because he said, since you have to be involved, it'd be hard to just pick the culture.
It's harder to write on it, but you still can do it. But research is helpful. We're not going to get into research too much today, but something you're good at, or should strive to be good at, is researching them because it helps you write those. Something you're good at.
I would say, like, creative writing. I am not a big fan of writing at all. I do not like it.
I'm a creative writer.
I would rather do math than.
That's really, I don't think I've ever, you're the first student I've ever had that says I'd rather do math than
writing.
write.
I don't like
You're the
written
same?
essays.
I don't like taking a point from a book and transferring it and putting my own idea into it.
Gotcha.
It's really hard.
Yeah, it is.
So.
It's a lot of stuff going on there. Sorry, just ignore the crying child. Something you're good at.
Oh, I don't think I'm good at anything.
There's nothing you're good at? What's wrong?
She wants more milk.
I don't have any more milk. Daddy will eat more milk. He's going to eat okay? Okay? Let's get back on my Star Wars thing. Alright. Star Wars. They're obsessed.
Like Lego Star Wars?
No, the real one. All 7 episodes.
Nice.
And we're
It's got
one.
good taste.
They do. The reason we picked it was so that we could come up with a movie that Cam's first hospital stay, he watched Frozen 24/7, and we lost something of ourselves sitting there. And so the next time we said, what movie can we pick that has the most options in Star Wars? So we intentionally geared him that way. Did you come up with anything while I was
I'm good.
comforting?
Oh, I'm good at folding papers.
At folding papers?
No, folding. Like getting
Failing them
I'm not getting papers at all.
at all. Okay, well, I guess that's actually kind of
I'm
a
good
cool
at
way to
not-
think about it. I mean,
I'm good at not being good at it.
okay, we're gonna fix that. Ben,
I guess
you're decent.
I'm
Don't
good
even
at-
start.
making points about my topic, but
Yes.
not really about getting the topic itself. That's
Fair enough. I'll allow that. Yeah.
So something that I'm bad at. Well, I'm really bad at not explaining enough.
Okay.
And
Like Mr. Johnson, and just leaving it there. You know, what are you talking about?
yeah.
All right.
Also, I'm kind of good at writing something that I like.
Mhm.
About something that I like.
Yes, so important to try to, if you can pick something you're actually interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if it's not. I enjoy writing. It does help. All right, Henry.
Like once I start writing, I get into like this stride.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's
And then it
really
gets
helpful,
better?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. We're gonna talk about that today. All right. Fair.
I have trouble. I mean, I can start like a paragraph sounding like totally clear and calm, and then when I get to the second one, I'm getting tired. So I'm not using as many good words as I should. My grammar is probably going down,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just brain dead.
Okay. Within 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
So you can have 1 paragraph that's good, and then you know you're gonna have to revise the second one.
Yeah.
It's actually unique. Usually it's the other way around. Usually someone's first paragraph is atrocious and you don't use it, and then the second one's decent. And then you kind of go back and forth. But if you know it, that's important, because then you know where to go back and revise.
This is awesome.
Yes.
This is perfect timing because tonight I need to start writing a 3-page paper.
Oh, good.
That's only like half of it though. It's actually gonna be 6 pages.
And Bethany brings up a good point. You know, she lives near me, so every now and then we have gone over papers. She's just come down and we've gone over them. And that is something you should ask for occasionally. If not for me, someone that you feel comfortable with, because it'd be very helpful going over things. So just bring that up. Okay, let's look at the first page. And just because I love this. And it is, how would you define good writing? I asked all of you what you're good at. Most of you came up with just about nothing. But the goal of this first page is to show you that there's a lot of breadth in how we define good writing. So, hopefully you're all good readers. I'm going to make you read them out loud. Ben, you can read the first one. Can you read A?
The end then of learning is to repair the ruins of our first parents by regaining to know God aright, and out of that knowledge to love Him, to imitate Him, and to be like Him, as we may the nearest by possessing our souls of pure virtue, which being united to the heavenly grace of faith, makes up the highest perfection. But because our understanding cannot in this body found itself but on sensible things, nor arrive so clearly to the knowledge of God and things invisible, as by orderly conning over the visible and inferior creature, the same method is necessarily to be followed in all discrete teaching. In seeing every nation affords not experience and tradition enough for all kinds of learning, therefore we are chiefly taught the languages of those people who have at any time been most industrious after wisdom. So the language is but the instrument conveying to us things useful to be read.
Yay! Way to go, Ben. Well done, Ben. That was the hardest one. Next one, Henry. Have fun.
Wait, what?
I'm sorry. How?
How? Your best. Channel your inner Briar Rabbit.
I'm glad you skipped me.
Yeah, right?
There come a
There come
time.
a time when King Lion got the briar stuck in his paw. You can do it. Go.
There.
Pretend none of us are here.
There come a time when King Lion got a briar stuck in his paw, and he got a shorter sick. Day after day, he sat there on his throne, a groaning and a groaning.
What word is that?
Scarce able to hold the crown on his head.
Wait, what word is that supposed to be?
He was scarcely able
Oh.
to hold the crown on his head.
Scarce able to hold the crown on his head. Their creatures that he was a keening over, they had to scratch round to catch him his food. And this one no easy matter, for King Lion had an appetite bigger than a hippie.
Sorry.
It got so that after a while, every family had to share their dinner with the king to keep him from starving to death.
Alright, that one's
No words, no words.
That was always fun. Alright, you're up next for number C. Letter C.
Didactic writings, avowedly designed for instruction, as the term implies, embrace all kinds of composition connected with the principles of art and science, or with the investigation of moral and physical truth. Of such is the great mass of works included under the term knowledge, embracing all books of instruction and all moral, political, and philosophical writings.
Excellent. Very good.
I'm gonna tell what's next. I remember
You remember this? I say we did do this in 10th grade, yeah. Alrighty, Elise, D.
If you should ever choose to bathe an armadillo, use 1 bar of soap and a whole lot of hope and 72 pads of Brillo.
Brillo. Alright, very good. Y'all know Brillo is kind of an old thing now, like the scrubbies. Alright, and then very last, Andy.
Oh yeah, I have been thinking about getting out of this lousy place. What a creepy setup. This little town is nowhere, and the school is about as exciting as Juvie Hall. And the only thing that I like better here is that I don't have to sit and study hall from 7 to 9 every night. There's somebody bugging me all the time. I'm not mentioning any names.
Nicely done. Very good. Alright, I want you to think about these quotations, and I want you to tell me, do you consider them good writing? Why or why not? So just a brief answer. We don't have to write it down, but just think about it for a minute, and then we will discuss them. You're not going to spend a whole lot of time, but just a few minutes discussing them. And while you're thinking, I'm just going to make sure everybody's okay. Well, Maggie, my eldest is 10, so officially she's watching them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought about letting
Is that
them.
the official age?
No, I know there isn't an official age.
I mean, for your family.
For my family, no, because it's Maggie. And sometimes Maggie is very responsible, and other times she's like, we could make wings out of cardboard and climb up to the roof and jump off and be butterflies!
Did she actually do that?
No, because I told her no.
In every detail you told her no not to do that.
No, she came up with it.
Oh,
And
okay.
then I said
And
no.
otherwise,
Yeah. No, I didn't find her on the roof. That would be worse. But anyway, all right. Let's talk about A. So, is A good writing? Yes,
Yes.
or no?
Yes.
Why yes?
Because it's long.
Well, because it's long. And no, not always true. Sometimes true. Sometimes not true. In this case, you're getting at something else with the length. So, what's he trying to say?
well, I mean, well, I was going to say that, Will, in terms of rhetoric, like in general audience, they wouldn't be able to understand some of this. Maybe.
What is the audience for this? Do you think? Professors, theologians. You're right. So for them, would this be good writing?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty good, right?
If you sat down with your family of 4 small children under the ages of 10, would they consider this good writing? No. Which of the quotes would my family like? My little people across the hall.
Or
B or D, right? The audience there is a broader one, and also it can be a younger one. Now, what about the difference between A and C? They're both didactic in scope. They're both trying to teach something, but they're very different.
C is way shorter.
C is way shorter, and who was it that's short? Is it Elise? Elise, did you say you can get things out really quickly? Yeah. So this is an Elise C here. She's saying a lot in a very short amount of time. So let's talk about the difference. What is the difference between A and C?
With C, sometimes it's better not to write out a lot in a short amount, but put a lot in a lot amount.
Okay, so that's actually a good point. Sometimes if you pack too much in each sentence, you leave people saying, I gotta think about this. But there's another difference between A and C, yeah.
Also, A will probably get you an A in the class and C won't, because he won't get the right enough length.
Depends on your teacher. That's something to know, your audience. Sometimes if they do have a length requirement, C is not going to get you a good grade. C is modern. A is what was considered perfect intellectual writing in the previous time. So you also have to think about that as your audience, the historicity factor. If I'm writing to whatever generation you guys are, the way I'm going to write is very different than the way I would write to my grandmother's generation. Okay? It's a totally different ability and interest in lengths and words and things like that. So keep that in mind. All right. And then what about E? Let's think about E.
Teenagers or like middle schoolers.
Yeah, it's definitely got that vibe going. Is it good writing?
It's very expressive.
Very expressive. It is emotional. It doesn't have any big words.
It leaves me wondering like what's gonna happen next.
It does. It gives you the tension, doesn't it? It conveys the tension. So here's the trick, and I'm going to make some of you mad. I read a book called The Maze Runner. I did not like The Maze Runner. I did not like the way it was written. And I love other books that are similar to this. And it's such a fine line what the difference is between Catching Fire and A Maze Runner. For me. But there is a difference there in just the way it's written, but they're both written to the same audience.
Means they don't give you enough information.
The Maze Runner I found to just be written poorly. I had trouble getting into the characters and just really visualizing what was going on in a way that other books of that genre, I have been able to just dive right in and really enjoy them. But I found The Maze Runner also got better as I progressed, which made me wonder if he needed to just go back and rewrite his first 2 chapters.
Yeah, that's what E does. It makes you get into the character and understand his opinion.
And sometimes, if you're trying to get into a guy who's from juvenile hall, is he going to talk like A? No, he's not. So you have to keep that in mind. All right, the point of all this is that writing will be different, and you need to understand the purpose of your writing. This is big. This is the top of the triangle. The purpose of your writing and the audience to whom you are writing. Even the differences between teachers, it's important to understand. Because teachers will have different expectations and interests, right? You all have had teachers for a few years now. Have you had a varying difference in what teachers want from you as far as the writing goes? Yes or no? Or have they been all about the same? Yeah, I mean, because it could be that Grey Friars is remarkably similar in that, but most of the time, that's not the case. And certainly if you go to college, it won't be. Some professors want 2 pages, no fluff, and other professors want 80 pages and all the bells and whistles. So it's something to know. All right, that's page 1. Also, this gives you hope because different voice, different tone, different methods of writing are all good writing. You don't have to sound like me to be a good writer. Okay. Or Mr. Johnson. Something like that. All right, flip to the next page. Very quickly, you do need to have a structure to your essays, and this page is an excellent resource for that. If you do not have some kind of formatted structure for your essays, just use this page. We're not going to go over it all that much today, but if you aren't aware that your essay should have a format, this is it. They need to have an introduction. They need to have a division of argument, a narrative. So if you like creative writing, now's your time, but you have to keep it lucid, brief, and plausible, so don't get too carried away. And then you have proof, refutation, and conclusion. If you have questions about this and you haven't had 10th grade writing yet, we will go over this in 10th grade writing a lot. If you want to go over it, you're in 9th grade, please let me know. We will go over it, but we're going to do it on an individual basis because most of you either have or have had. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. So, flip to the next page. When are we done, by the way? Does anybody know? I will keep you here till 8 o'clock.
About
3:49. Why did you decide to come?
I don't really know.
I thought it was 5:15.
5:15 or 12?
It was 2 hours.
2 hours? Okay. All right. 5:15. Y'all are stuck with me. What the All right. Next one. I love this diagram. So turn the page to this. This is what every argumentative style essay should look like, regardless of whether you use classical format or something else. This is so helpful. You start with an introduction that is broad, and then you narrow to something specific. So, what are you writing on right now? Any class? What's your name? Guy in the maroon. Yes, James. James. What's something you're writing? Oh, hi. What's something you're writing on right now?
We don't have any big assignments right now. We do have a speech thing looking.
Okay, what's your speech going to be on?
It kind of depends, but we did different ones. Like mine's on the culture of Athens.
Culture of Athens.
Sparta all the way.
What? Sorry.
Just remember,
Oh, you're about right. Yeah, you're doing that. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so you would start broad about Athens, and then you're going to narrow to something specific about what you're talking about. Do you have any ideas yet on what you're going to narrow it towards? Okay, well, there's so many things. What would you narrow it towards, Cal? No, he's just angry. He only says no right now. All right, but you can see there at the bottom, there's a thesis statement that you want to end your introduction with. And then you have these main paragraphs that you have to have your supporting arguments. And that's kind of like the column. So speaking Greek, it looks like a column. All right, you have your Corinthian top if you want, or Ionic if you prefer, whatever. And then your straight line down, and then you have your foundation that also bows out at the end, and it is the concluding paragraph where you have to restate your thesis and then broaden it back out. Whether it's a call to action we're talking about that with deliberative essays in 10th grade, or you have to have some kind of solution to a problem that you've identified, something like that. So each block and the bottom there, in many ways, writing a paper is like constructing a building. Each block must be placed in the right relationship to the other blocks, and everything rests on a solid foundation. The foundation of your report or paper is the thesis statement. And one of the things I did promise Mr. Johnson I would say about thesis statements is how important it is that you remind your readers within your paper that it's there. So within topic sentences 1, 2, and 3, for example, you would be reminding us what that, no, y'all,
I don't know why she
what's wrong with you?
Because everybody took off their shoes and she didn't.
Why don't you have your shoes? So you want everybody else to put their shoes back on? Listen, guys, these are things I can't deal with right now. Just go. You have your fuzzy socks on. Why don't you register your fuzzy socks? You need me to go there? No, you need to go with me. I want you with me, okay? Daddy, you do your thing. Yes, Mama? Or go on. Why don't you go here? What's that? All right. Anyway, so thesis sentences also need to be included throughout. Does that make sense how you do that? You don't have to actually say your thesis sentence word for word within your paper over and over and over again, but there are ways to reference them. I have another handout, so if you turn the page, we're going to show you how to do that. Can you watch the movie, please? Why not? Okay. You'd rather go watch Star Wars? That would be really funny if I just had you guys all go watch Star Wars and solemnly pledge to not tell your parents.
Oh, let's do it.
Please.
Bring the projector here?
Yes.
I used to be so cool and so not cool anymore. All right.
You're wearing a jean jacket.
What's wrong with my jean jacket? I haven't bought any clothes in the last 15 years, so. Oh, is this in again? Yes, I bought this when I was 16. Alright. Got a lesson for you all. Hang on to your clothes. They do come back. Alright, here we go. Oh, now at 8, so now it's gonna hurt me to talk. Alright, I'm gonna pick on somebody. Bethany, can you read this beautiful introduction here for me?
Oh, fine. Have you ever seen a little boy picking on a little girl? We take Calvin and Susie, for example, from the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin ambushes Susie with snowballs, and Susie sniffs in the street house and shoots spitballs at her. At first, it might appear that Calvin hates Susie, but close examination shows that he actually likes her. In fact, he acts mean towards her in order to hide his true feelings. He actually wants to protect his feelings so that if Susie finds out about them and rejects him, he won't have to have his feelings hurt. If you can relate to this scenario, then you will be able to understand similar experience in William Shakespeare's play, Much Ado About Nothing. This play features a man and woman who mutually act as though they despise one another. Whenever Benedict and Beatrice meet, they squabble and insult one another, but these squabbles and insults, I believe, actually signify the deep-seated affection of one another. Like Calvin and Susie, Benedict and Beatrice actually love one another. They hide their true feelings behind masks of hostility in order to protect their feelings.
Great. So what's the thesis? What's going to be the thesis of this paper?
Something about how like not be.
It's here. You can literally read it word for word.
Things like that you're picking on someone that you actually like them.
Make it a little bit more narrow. You're right. But the thesis is going to focus specifically on two people.
Oh boy.
Hmm?
A boy and a girl.
No, not a boy and a girl.
Calvin and Susie.
Not even Calvin and Susie.
Beatrice and whatever.
Benedict. Yeah. From the Shakespearean play. This is from an essay that a student wrote on Much Ado About Nothing. And all of the supporting points all have to relate back to what?
The Lindsay or
The what?
the two kids.
Not necessarily Calvin and Susie and is it Calvin? Yeah, Calvin and Susie. But they have to all point back to this idea that these two characters are hiding their true feelings behind a mask of hostility. So let me give you an example. Are anybody familiar with the play or the movie?
Yes.
Great movie. But you have the first part, maybe. There's a lot of naked people, but you can't really see.
Okay.
Right after that, it's really good. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
anyway, so we just skipped the first part, but it's funny. So there's a couple of different things that Beatrice and Benedict do, but one of the things that they do a lot is yell at each other. And so you could do a whole paragraph talking about how calling each other names and just yelling can actually sometimes be a sign of interest. Maybe not affection, might not go that far, but at least of interest. And then you would tie it back to that thesis. This is just one example of the fact that they yell at each other so much that shows they're actually interested in each other. And then you could go on from there and talk about, they do nice things for each other even though they don't want each other to know about it, that sort of thing. And that'll be another one. Then you would tie it back. You can see here they have true feelings of love, but they hide in their hostility. Anyway, that's the thesis. Here's a sample body paragraph. Turn to the next page on the same play, but a different thesis, so don't get confused by that. But what I love about this, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure that you all understand, is how to incorporate quotes within paragraphs. And this is a beautiful example of how to do that. When you're building that pillar, that middle part here of your bowed eye, this part in here is where most of your research is going to come in. And research needs to include actual quotes from sources, pretty much 9.8 times out of 10. So here's an example of how to do that. Claudio accuses Hero of hypocrisy. By this he means that Hero appears one way on the outside, but is actually another way on the inside. He describes her, for example, as, quote, this is a direct quote from the play, but the sign and semblance of her honor, end quote, that's Act 4, Scene 1, line 32. Both sign and semblance indicate appearance, not reality. Claudio underscores this discrepancy between what she seems to be and what he mistakenly believes she is when he exclaims, and here's a nice big quote, "You seem to me as Diane in her orb, as chaste as is the bud ere it be blown. But you are more intemperate in your blood than Venus, or those pampered animals that rage in savage sensuality." Hard to come back from that one. Anyway, Diana, now see that's the quote, and then the writer then explains how that quote fits with the thesis that Claudio mistakenly thinks Hero has been a hypocrite. Diana, the goddess of chastity, could not be any more different than Venus, the goddess of erotic love, infamous for her infidelity. Infidelity is a fancy word for cheating. But worse still, Claudio reduces Hero to subhuman status, likening her to pampered animals as a pets. Like, think little chihuahua in the purse. That's basically what he called her. I'm sorry. Not a good idea. Not sure that very many women would come back from that one. But anyway, even claiming that Hero's intemperance exceeds theirs. Perhaps the most blistering accusation comes when Claudio characterizes her as a rotten orange, sweet and pretty on the outside, but putrid and moldy on the inside. That's another quote. So there are several quotes within this paragraph. All of these accusations testify, here's the thesis again, testify to the horror and indignation Claudio feels upon learning, albeit mistakenly, that Hero is a hypocrite. Now there at the end you can see that the thesis has been referenced to. It's not word for word there, but we're reminded, oh yeah, he's writing about hypocrisy and the Hero-Claudio relationship. And that's where this is all going. So let's take a look at some of the different quotes in here. My alarm. All right. No comments? No. Let him. Yeah. He's very distracting. And you know it. You want some more pencils? Yes, please. Because I'm getting food. Alright. Alright. So I want you to notice a couple of different ways you can use quotes. First of all, but the sign and semblance of her honor. It's just a tiny bit of a quote within a paragraph. That's one way that you can use quotes. Another way you can use quotes is that full paragraph there. You can just take the whole thing. If it says it well and it's interesting, go ahead and throw the whole thing in there. And then you can also use actually just phrases like rotten orange is another excellent way to use quotes. Questions on the use of quotations. Is anybody really confused on that? Because it's something I was curious to know about. How well we are doing with helping you understand that. Mm-hmm.
Is it like, isn't it bad you just have like a quote and its own sentence?
Yes, it is. And we have a whole handout in here on that. But yes, you never want to leave your quotes alone. They have to be in some kind of frame sentence. You also almost never want to end with a quote. You always want to explain, either before, or you can end with it if you've explained before. But you can't kind of throw it in there and leave the audience to figure out how it connects. You have to tell them how it connects, how it connects to your thesis.
You're saying like tell it in the same sentence. Or like.
Yeah, but oftentimes you're going to need another sentence or two,
Yeah.
even after that, to really fully explain it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can see, well, we'll get there with the frame sentence thing. The frame sentence thing. Mm-hmm. This is why homeschooling is such a challenge for us. Yeah. See this there. Anyway. Other questions? You guys know when you should use a quote versus using your own words? No. Let's go over that. So, you read something and you know you want to include the information, but you aren't sure how. If you can paraphrase it and be like Elise and make it better and make it shorter and make it more appropriate to what you're writing about, then that's what you should do. So if you can say it better, does that make sense? If they say it better, or there's something artistically beautiful about the way they say it, or you feel like you just need to change your voice. So let's say it just sounds too much like me and I feel like people are getting bored, kind of like Henry's getting bored right now because I'm doing all the talking, right? Sometimes you just need that wake up moment, and that can be, a quote can be used for that too. So, or you can just stand up, that works too, but quotes are also helpful.
I usually use quotes when it proves a point.
You can use quotes when it proves a point. You should use quotes when it proves a point, obviously. But you also need to make sure you're not leaving the quote to be the only thing that's proving your point. You need to also have your own ideas and your own support in that paragraph as well.
You can use a quote when you want to like show that this specific person said it, right?
Yes, if that's
Like this famous person said this.
right. And sometimes that can be useful just because it's a very important person, and it might be that in and of itself might be intrinsically persuasive. Right? If you say John Adams said this, people are going to go, oh, John Adams, kind of an important guy. I would like to listen to him. So yes, that's another reason why sometimes the value of that can outweigh even a poorly worded quote. For example, I'm helping Hannah Lindsay with her thesis, and it's one that might be challenging for some Christians. So one of the books that she's using is Francis Schaeffer. Everyone loves Francis Schaeffer. So if she were writing her paper and she had a quote that wasn't all that great, but she was able to attribute it to Francis Schaeffer, so you see how that's very persuasive, because then people are going, oh, well, Francis Schaeffer, he's amazing, so if he thinks that. Yes, it's a big one. Yeah, it's one of the things. Yeah, I knew she would do it. Anyway, but, so that's another reason why I'm not using it. Caroline, can you not do that? Or if you want, you can take them and do it in the other room. You want to go do it in front of Star Wars? All right, any other questions about quotes? Okay, turn to the next page, because there are also quotes in this, this is another Shakespeare one. I have a Shakespeare problem. Love Shakespeare. I know, it's not working in spirits. Alrighty, but this also has a lot of quotes as well. So, Bear, you're up.
Shakespeare quotes much of as he liked it. It is to satisfy lovers with reader. This satire appears in Pepsin as compared. It was excessive self-abasement for Phoebe, Roland's posturing. In every case, Shakespeare implies that lover's behavior is foolish because it is so artificial, so phony, fake, stereotype, ridiculous, and not natural. In a word, it was too conventional. Think about it. In Phoebe's eyes really wound silly.
And you can skip that. That's just a reference. It's a quote.
Do lovers actually die for love? Of course not. Still, people like to pretend and participate in these ageless all romantic love. Jack Byers describes one player card as a stereotypical lover, singing like a furnace with a woeful ballad made to his useless eye. For 400 years may have elapsed since Shakespeare wrote As You Like It, but people today still act according to conventional stereotypes and just more updated stereotypes. Perhaps Shakespeare has pinpointed something paradoxical about human behavior. The expression of true love is often taken for convention. If the truest poetry is the most
Feigning. Fake is another way. That's a quote.
perhaps the truest love is likewise the most
Pretending. All right. So clearly someone who doesn't like Shakespeare or the idea of falling in love at all. But there also you can see quotes as well in the conclusion of that one. Now that conclusion doesn't have a call to action. It's a 9th grade piece, so we didn't really cover that yet. But it does leave you with some idea of questioning falling in love and romantic love and all that hogwash, as he would have said. And so it does leave you questioning. Anyway, but there's another way that you can use quotation marks. I also just like to give you examples of introductions and conclusions. You can see how this does broaden out a little bit there at the end. It brings us back to modernity, out of the world of Shakespeare, and applying it to ourselves. how fake are we, especially with those people that we love the most, and gives you something to think about, which conclusions should do. All right, the next page I want to apologize for. This is a copyrighted thing, so please don't go ahead and publish this. Yep, you're only allowed. Teachers are allowed to make copies. It's not illegal, but don't go and take this and put it in the book, please. I think there's a copyright on the back, but I couldn't change the font for that reason. But what it does is shows you the way to introduce quotations. One of them is with a complete sentence and a colon. So just look at number 1 here, where the underlines are. We're going to skip this first part. All right, and it says, in an example from where I lived and what I lived for, Thoreau directly states his purpose for going into the woods, colon, and here's the quote. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. End quote. Another example. Oh, are you okay? Okay. Another example. Thoreau's philosophy might be summed up best by his repeated request for people to ignore the insignificant details of life. Colon. Quote, our life is frittered away by detail. An honest man has hardly need to count more than his 10 fingers, or in extreme cases he may add his 10 toes and lump the rest. Simplicity, 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 end quote. So that is one way to add larger quotations into your paper. Your sentence at the beginning, Joel, like you're asking about, colon, and then the quote.
When, you know how quotations usually have 2 marks? When do you use just 1?
Oh, is that here? Okay. Here, take this.
Like, if there's you get the quote, and then there's a quote
And then
inside.
if you
Or like an extra.
All right. So there are a lot of different. Oh yes, you can come in. This is casual. That's right.
You want to see?
I was Fawcett.
Oh.
He's really mean. He loves you. You just have to understand that he doesn't think anything about romantic love. So, it's like the Susie Calvin Hobbs thing. Yeah. He loves you when he's dating you. All right. So, quotations. Double quotation marks. Hi. Go home. Love you. We're good? You just pop in and say hi? He did not get his 12 o'clock food because he was at the doctor. So he was 5 o'clock very early and he hasn't had his rental.
You sure about that?
Fine.
I don't know if you see me.
Yeah. I know it'll be already coming up.
He's just really brutal. He's jealous because I sit there and grade and go, I love my class, they're so wonderful. And he sits there like, these kids. All right, anyway, so. What? Yeah, it's a fact.
No. Do you think there's she's Miss Wilson?
She is shorter than me. I think she is one of the few people I'm not necessarily. But I usually wear heels, so I'm the second.
It's okay.
Her head literally comes
You'll
to
be
the floor.
caught
Like,
one
hi.
of
Okay.
No.
Maybe.
Whatever.
Alrighty, so this is one way to use the double quotation marks. If this is your words here, and then you just have the double quotation marks within. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Let's say you want to do this. You're quoting my husband talking about me. Okay? So you would go, double quotes for the quote of what Luke's saying, single quote for single quotes for what he said, that's a single quote there, and then double quotes, oh, hang on, let me do it this way, it'll get a little more clear. All right, so that we're not getting into the comment. So this single quotation mark is ending what he said. Now I have to show that we're ending the quotation mark, the whole quotation rather. And then here are your words. Can't spell. That's sorry, what's your name? Olivia. That's Olivia talking here. Well, we hope she does, or she could disagree. Alrighty. But you can see how it's going to be very rare that you'll use those single quotes. And the most often that I've seen it used in papers in high school are quotes from Scripture, where you would be quoting the Bible, and then within that Bible verse, Jesus is speaking. Does that make sense? And so then you would be like, 1 Peter 1:2 supports this when it says, quote, I myself follow Christ when he said, quote, to live is Christ and to die. Take up your cross and follow me. That's not an actual Bible verse. But do you see how that you've got quotes within quotes? So 9 times out of 10, you need the double quotes. That's really where it comes down to. This is the only time when you use single quotation marks.
Okay, and that comma, is it supposed to be in, like, before that single quote, or the comma after?
This one?
Yeah.
So the rule of thumb is really easy. For commas and periods always go within quotation marks. Always, always, always. Question marks, exclamation points, hyphens almost always go within. But if they apply to the whole sentence, then they go outside the quote. If they apply to just the quote, then they go inside the quote. So they're a little trickier. But again, 9 times out of 10, you're using a comma or a period, they always go in. Always, always, always. Just err on that. Even if you get it wrong one time, because I don't think there are any exceptions, but maybe there is an exception, it's better to just always put them in. You'll get a good grade still that way, if that makes sense. But always put them in. Question, or you just stretching?
I was stretching.
All right, so that's quotes. This is introducing, number 1 is introducing with a complete sentence and a colon. And then if you flip to the next page, you've got number 2, which is to use what I was just showing you here, an introductory or explanatory phrase. It's not a complete sentence. So you can use a colon with a quote when you've got a complete sentence that you're introducing the quote with. But when you've only got a short thing like this is a commonly heard phrase, that's not a complete sentence, that's when you use a comma, which we just covered. So we're kind of going backwards a little bit there. But if you flip to the 3rd page, you'll see some examples. Thoreau suggests the consequences of making ourselves slaves to progress when he says, comma, quote, we do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us, end quote. Do you see how when you have not a complete sentence, you're going to use a comma to introduce the quotation, not a colon. And that really is about it. There is a number 3 there, and 4, which are using short words. This is advanced writing, and it's excellent, so I'm going to read you a couple of examples of it, but it's okay if you're not there yet. This is something that will come as you develop as a writer. An example, Thoreau suggests the consequences of making ourselves slaves to progress when he says that, quote, we do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us. And even just a few words with number 4, if you turn to the next page. It's such great, it's so good to do this. Thoreau argues that people blindly accept shams and delusions, that's a direct quote from his work, as the, quote, sound is truth, while regarding reality as fabulous. What this does for you is it gives you a 1-2 punch, because it's your words, it's your sentence structure, it's your idea, and you get the support of a really strong source within the same sentence. So it covers a lot of bases. It says, I'm well read enough on this subject that I can just quote random words that are his. I just know them, but I put it in my own sentence. It really is very effective rhetorical structure. And then just notice the punctuation. That's what the last page says. Really, quotes, you're going to use colons or commas. You're not going to use semicolons to introduce quotes. Hardly ever do you do that. It's almost always either a comma or a colon. So again, there's a lot of rules of thumbs for quotations that makes them easy. Commas, periods go inside them. You introduce quotes with either colons or commas. You don't use them with anything else. And so it can be, and always have a frame sentence, which Joel mentioned. You always want to have your own bit of that sentence that it fits with. Okay. Other questions about quotations before we move on to nuts and bolts in writing? I can't read now.
Can I go to the bathroom?
Sure, help yourself. Yeah, anybody else let's stretch for a second before we move on? We're an hour in. Grab more food if you want it. Are these good? I don't have time to go to a real bakery.
I'm sorry, I'm perfect.
I wish we would have been able to do that.
Did you go to
Yeah.
the thing?
Not just, but yeah.
I would have rather had a test. More time for it.
Oh, it's almost winter. Yeah. It's almost winter.
And also, I thought the presentation was
Yes.
so I was already
Yeah, see, nowhere near middle. So summer, Carolina. I think summer is cool.
It's not that one.
It's pretty warm.
Okay, I need water. I need water. Oh, I want kayak. No, I can't. You think they're coming back? No. Henry will. He'll just fall asleep down the corner. What's that?
She got mad at me because I'm in her corner.
It is my corner.
It is your corner. It's kind of weirding me out, actually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I don't even know who she is because I'm sitting, she's sitting in front of me.
Are you guys almost always in this room?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you really do have spots that are kind of here.
I usually sit over there, but I was forced to move, so.
Then sit up like right there. The first seat of this one.
Oh, I guess, well, no, I better keep this going because I couldn't figure out how to start up last.
You know, I have the same seat every class. And I put a sticky note on my chair and
Are we all set?
smart idea. After cleaning crew got there and cleaned it back. And it stayed there. It's like, you
have to take this seat.
Well, if you do it Monday after class, no one comes through.
No, they're
Middle
middle
school
school classes. And they don't even joke about it. I'm like, but I came here today.
How's your doing?
Joel.
My mom,
I was thinking of her office. Joel, she was harder for you all.
Yeah, she did.
Good.
scared me.
So that. All right, we all back? Wait, I need.
Okay. Alright. Before we get started, what is a decathlon?
It's like this fitness thing. They
Oh,
have,
it's a fitness thing.
It's
well, it's
yeah,
not
like,
like, it's
it's
kind of
like
like
a
events
sport.
that they train you for then.
Oh. So there are people out there like posting logs around and stuff.
Well, there might be
No,
today.
not really. Alright, now you're gonna need your pencils for the next hour, so make sure you have one. Wait, what? Pencil or pen. Yeah, either one.
I have a black pen, but I don't know if this is mine or not. What about mine? I'm not sure what mine. What is mine are new?
What?
Mine are new. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Oh, wait.
what? I have two on mine.
Alright, here we go.
wait, is it a lot of writing?
No. Editing. We're gonna do sentence and fragment, sentence run-on and fragment editing.
Oh, fun.
We aren't doing a lot of writing today. Good, we don't have time for a lot of writing. Alright, so the next page, after you go through all that quotation stuff, that's all big picture stuff that we just covered. The rest of this is all about the sentence. And I could make you stand up and recite the Shirley grammar thing, but I'll just do it for you. A sentence is complete when 5 simple rules. It meets. Does anybody know any of the 5 rules of a complete sentence?
It has to be a complete thought.
Yes. Yeah. An end mark.
Capital, and noun, and verb.
A subject, which is a noun or a pronoun. A verb. Capital letter. Alright, that's it. So that looks easy. When my 10-year-old quotes, does her little thing, it sounds easy. And it can be, but it can also be rather difficult when you get into writing. So we are going to spend some time. Raise your hand if you've ever had fragment or run-on marked on a paper. A bit. I will raise my hand. I have. Be brave. Be strong. Okay. I'm here.
Oh my god,
I use Go
yeah.
I think if you've had FRAG or R-O or sometimes they do little things around it. Yeah. Okay. So this is all that. A run-on is when you have too much. If you want to be fancy, tell your teacher you were just doing stream of consciousness writing, and I'm doing it intentionally. But don't do that. It's bad. But it's when you have too many subjects, too many verbs, too many ideas, and it's therefore not complete because it's too much. Again, referencing my 10-year-old daughter, it's kind of like listening to her talk. It just keeps going. You never stop until you tell her stop. You have to actually tell her stop. All right. So that's kind of what a run-on is. A fragment is more like Elise. I'm going to say as little as I can, but sometimes that's so little that we go, what? What's happening here? So those are their opposites, but both of them are wrong. So I want you to take a look. Number 3, on your paper, write. Number 1, whether the following groups of words are a fragment or a sentence, label them F or S. Number 2, if they form a fragment, correct them by rewriting them to form a sentence. So let's do number 1 together to make sure everyone understands what we're doing. Thumbing through the first few pages of the book. Would we identify that as a fragment, or would we identify that as a sentence? A fragment. It is a fragment. We have a verb, thumbing. We don't know who is thumbing, so we have no subject. It's also not complete sentence. We're left going, what's happening? Why are we thumbing? So, how would we correct that, Ben? What would you do?
I would make like that sentence like a clause at the beginning of the sentence.
Right, and then just add another one. So you could say, thumbing through the first few pages of the book, comma, I finally found the page I was looking for, something like that. You could also just add a subject. She was thumbing through the first few pages of the book. Is all you need. 2 more words to make that a complete sentence. All right. All right. You can go through the rest of that, and if you want help, you can confer with your neighbor. But don't confer with anybody on the other side of it because that's chaos. I know you'll need help. Got it, Andy? Okay. Good. Yeah, you can go in. If you want, you can write out. You don't have to. By the way, while you're writing, almost none of this is coming out of my brain. A lot of this is previous teachers, things like that. Just in case you wondered why it looks so unprofessional. Well, I should really type it up to make it look appropriate instead of like. This is one of those things where it's like, do we eat, not eat first, or that's what it does. It is, but hang on. Are y'all done with fragments?
Yes.
No? Hang on. If you don't want to do the run-ons for a minute, you can, and you can wait. And then we'll do it in a second. Yeah, are there any of them that are not fragments? In 1 through 12?
What kind of questions?
Oh, it's possible. Yeah, no, there are. Let me see, I can tell you how many. It is a gerund clause, but a gerund clause can serve as the function of a subject. So it is a complete sentence, right? Yeah, that's where it can get confusing because sometimes you'd like to say just don't ever begin a sentence with an ing word and you want to have a fragment, but that's not actually the case. Sometimes you're that's really great writing, but it's when you don't finish it out that you run into problems. All right, so not done, that's okay, but we got to shovel along here. All right, so, sorry, that's a Canadian expression. You guys don't even shovel someone. All right, number 1. Thumbing through the, we did that. Number 2, sorry. On the other side of the mountain is a beautiful valley. Sentence or fragment? Sentence, can go. Unless Mary told her the truth. Fragment. All right, so we can fix that in a number of ways. Unless Mary told the truth, her parents would ground her. Or unless Mary told the truth, the gangsters would keep her bound and gagged and thrown in the river. I don't know, be as inventive as you want, but you can see there that we are missing the verb. We've got some kind of a subject we're talking about, and we don't know what the action is that goes with that. All right, number 4, playing the piano is her hobby. Sentence or phrase? Sentence. And it is tricky because that playing the piano, you're not quite sure, but that is a phrase that's serving as the subject of the sentence. So, gerund phrase. All right, actually gerund clause. All right, after rehearsal, we gathered and memorized our lines. Sentence or fragment? Sentence, very good. Number 6, even though he had to support his aged mother and 6 brothers and sisters with his earnings as a grocery clerk. Fragment. You could say he found time to write, or he found time to go hang out with his friend, whatever you want to do. All right, before the game, Larry left the gym. Sentence. To warn motorists of the ice forming on the bridges. Fragment. There was a sign. Cougars have become increasingly rare. Sentence. Haste makes waste. Sentence. Simplest sentences you can get. The students participating in the rally. Fragment. We've got students, we have our subject, we know what they're doing, but we don't know what the action sentence is. We need to finish it up with students participating in the rally are excused early from school. Or something like that. All right, and then number 12, writing a paragraph can even be difficult. Actually is a sentence, and that's where it's tricky because it's kind of incomplete without the paragraph that goes with it, right? Writing a paragraph can be hard. Easy. Writing a paragraph can even be difficult. But it is technically, you've got writing a paragraph is your subject. Writing is your gerund clause. Can be is your verb. And difficult is your predicate adjective. So it's tricky, but it is actually a sentence. All right, now, did any of you get any of those wrong that you want me to explain? No. Good. All right. I would hope that you would be okay with that. How many of you feel like you're confused when you get a fragment marked in your paper? It's like, oh, I didn't notice that. Have any of you ever been surprised by the fragments or run-ons in your paper? Like, oh, you know that was there? No. Well, here's a foolproof way to avoid it. Read your papers out loud. It doesn't take long. You don't even have to actually literally read them out loud. Do you know the difference between reading and then reading in a way that you hear the words in your head? Does that make sense? Like someone's speaking, maybe I'm crazy. I am crazy. But I can do that where it's like, there's a difference between reading this and then reading and I'm actually saying the words in my head. Or you can read them out loud. Define a run-on sentence. Define fragment. On your paper, write whether the following groups of words are fragments. Or you're crazy too. The point is, you catch almost all run-ons and fragments if you read them out loud. What your brain does is, and it's your brain's fault in the sense it's not yours, it will just read over things that aren't clear or that are incomplete when you know that they're supposed to be complete. Does that make sense? You actually read sentences in your head the way you intend them to be and not necessarily the way they're actually written down. Does that make sense? It's science. So it's really important that you take time to just read it out loud because you'll be surprised and it's like, oh, I thought that was clear, but then I read it out loud and it makes absolutely no sense at all. And it's incredible how much of a difference there can be, a dissonance between what you think you've got there and what actually is there. So just be aware, that's my take. I mean, if there's one thing you do after this, please consider doing that. And when you're finished an essay, read it out loud. So helpful, particularly for little things like this. All right, let's look at run-ons then. All right, some of the following sentences are written correctly, but others are run-on sentences. Identify as a sentence or a run-on. If it is a run-on, you can correct it, but you can't use ellipsis. Notice that I crossed that out. So, same thing. Let's do number 1 together. Keats came into the house from the garden where he had been writing and casually threw down some paper. On it was written, Ode on a Grecian urn. So we have a run-on there, okay? And this is one of my favorite run-ons called a comma slice. So after the word paper, you'll see a comma there. There are ways that you can join two sentences together, but one of them is not a comma. You can do a comma with something else. Anybody remember this acronym? Yeah. A comma slice is a form of run-on sentence. It happens so often that it's developed its own name. So if you have just a comma, dividing two complete sentences together, and you do not include one of these words with your comma, you have just given yourself a run-on sentence.
You put the
So every time you have just a comma, see if you can add one of these words, like with number 1. Keats came into the house from the garden where he had been writing and casually threw down some paper, comma, and on it was written, Ode on a Grecian urn. If you include an and there, you have just transformed a grammatical error into a compound sentence.
Can you just make 2 sentences?
You could, and in fact, in this case, I would. I think that suits better. But this is another way to correct it. Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference between comma splice here and where you have like a comma next to the subject and
Yeah, like how you're not supposed to have them, you mean?
Yeah. I thought that was a comma splice where you put it in between like two main parts of it.
Often a comma splice without this is actually what kind of ends up happening, but not always. There isn't a difference, or there is a difference. They both get labeled as comma splices, or misused comma. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that I'm right in saying comma splices are when you have just a comma between the two sentences.
Yeah, I just want to make sure because I heard like they're both using comma splices.
Anytime you hear that word, you know you've misused a comma. But I would have said, in that situation, I would have said a misused comma. Usually showing you where to put the commas. Often it's that there's supposed to be two commas, not one. It's usually what happens. You'd have to come to my workshop when you bring your essay, and then I'll look at it and tell you what it is. Alrighty, so let's go through these, and you can look to your neighbor for help if you want. We are not going to, just to reassure you when you get to the next page, we are not going to do the paragraph on the back because we don't have time, but we do want to go through that one. So if you will do 2 through 12, that will be the end of this worksheet. If there isn't even a comma, that's certainly just a clean old run-on sentence. Yeah, absolutely. And then the way you just want to make sure you correct it, you don't just throw a comma in there. Either a semicolon or a comma according to the notion. But you don't have that coordinating notion. And I know from my class, I don't know if Mr. Johnson does this, but I always label the error from the little brown handbook, so that if you aren't sure what kind of a comma error it is, you can go and look it up, so you know how to fix it. I don't know.
To use my comma splice my sections.
Right. Yeah. Which is also helpful, but
It was good on like really big.
on the big things, it's very time consuming. So I understand that. I kind of have a lot of them memorized, so it's not as long for me anymore as it used to be. Until I taught back in 8th grade, and then they have a different little round handbook, different numbers. Anyway. So, but yeah, I think Mr. Johnson's big on the comma splices, so.
5 points for every mistake.
Yeah. But the good thing is to use a maximum negative 20.
Yeah.
That's it?
What?
We did not do that for like 50 off for grammar.
Well, I may have talked to him.
You guys should okay, you do that.
Well,
Yeah,
you should
do
have
that.
You
guys have it so easy now.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
We're all learning. We're all learning. Using a rubric for grammar is essential.
We're not cursed. You're not cursed, okay? We're like cursed. We have like 40 copies.
That's y'all's fault. It's not a curse. It's because y'all don't pay attention.
Yeah, we don't.
Or do your homework.
It's your fault.
That's fine.
Distracting boundary.
I gotta tell you, Jewel, I've only interacted with you for an hour and a half, but already I would say when you would say I'm cursed, I don't believe you.
Yeah. It's very hard.
Alright, well, everyone else is Besides me.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right, back to your run-on sentences. minute at a time. Better go a minute at a time.
Do you do 4 2?
No, we don't have time for the paragraph. All right, let's take a look. You may not be done, but you can just go with us. Okay. Lord Ross built a telescope in Ireland in 1845. It was often enacted because of poor Irish weather. Okay, so a couple of ways you can correct that. It is a run-on. Okay, take a look. Lord Ross built, sentence 1. It was, sentence 2. Question over you.
How do you know for sure if it's a run-on? Because that looks like a sentence.
So it's, the only way you can know for sure is by saying the word. Yeah, but definitely always be on the lookout for subjects and verbs. The next handout, actually, we look at the 4 types of sentences. And this is a compound sentence where you have 2 subjects and 2 verbs. Where people really get into trouble is sometimes you have 1 subject and 2 verbs. Like if you did it this way. Lord Ross built a telescope and he experienced poor weather. This is terrible thing. But that actually is a complete sentence because Lord Ross is the subject for built a telescope and experienced poor weather. Does that make sense? So it can be really confusing. But if you have 2 subjects and 2 verbs, if you can at least identify that,
Okay.
then evaluate whether you need to have.
There can only be 2, like the maximum is 2 subjects and 2 verbs.
Yeah, so you mean like can you keep going?
Yeah, so like you can diagram it to make sure, but like when you see that there's 2 sentences being put together, like there should be one of those words, like a comment in one of those words.
And one of those words. Or a semicolon is another great one that doesn't get used very often. And that's actually what I would use here because there's such a close connection between those 2 sentences. They really are one idea in so many ways. And a semicolon is a really great job of being grammatically correct, but also still allowing your mind to really connect those 2 things together.
Okay, that's the only thing a semicolon does, it like connects 2 sentences.
Yeah, it does have a lot of other things that you can use it for. If you're interested, I recommend Eats, Shoots, and Leaves by Lynn Truss. It's a great book. But also your Little Brown Handbook has a whole section on semicolons. But I love semicolons with compound sentences. They don't get used very often. They're really great. It's very effective. But yes, so that is one because you can see there, Lord Ross built, it was 2 different sentences. All right, number 3. Wind and water are 2 main causes of erosion since they constantly change the appearance of the earth. Sentence or run-on? Sentence. And there again, it's confusing because you have wind and water are subject and verb. They change, subject and verb. So why is this a run-on? Anybody know? There's one word that keeps it from being a run-on. It's the word since.
Shouldn't since be like with, so, and fanboy?
It is a different kind. You actually can't use since for an independent clause. These are for joining 2 independent clauses together. Since actually makes that a dependent clause. It can't stand alone. It can also be a preposition, yes. So look at that. Since they constantly change the appearance of the earth. Do you see how that's not complete? It's what we call a dependent clause. That's why that's not a run-on. It's getting, I know, this is not getting confusing. I'm sorry. It is hard. But that's why you don't need to have an and there. Number 4, the sun's rays striking raindrops can produce a rainbow you can see. I'm wanting to correct while I'm reading. You try again. The sun's rays striking raindrops can produce a rainbow you can see if the sun is behind you and the rain is ahead of you. Run-on. All right. How'd you fix it, Ben?
I put a comma. I put a period after it, and then made if the sun is behind you, a sentence, and then crossed out and if they can. No, I mean if the sun is behind you, the rain is ahead of you. Sentence.
I think I would actually put the period after rainbow. Only because the sun's rays striking raindrops can produce a rainbow, you can see it. Still sounds like a run-on to me. But I see where you're going. That you can see would work. If you change to that you can see. And then you have a relative dependent clause. All right, but anyway, you can change your wording, or you can do the sun's rays striking raindrops can produce a rainbow, period. You can see it if the sun is behind you and the rain is ahead of you. And technically, you don't really need a comma there.
Wait,
Those are the ones that we allow.
don't you need sun rays and striking raindrops?
Sorry? Don't you need sun rays and striking raindrops?
The sun's rays and striking raindrops
We do.
can produce. Do we already know that or not?
No, I'm not understanding your question. I'm trying to understand you. I'm
It
really
says
stupid.
the sun's rays
Mhm.
and I put in and striking raindrops. Striking
Oh. So what they're doing there is using the action striking, saying the sun rays are striking the raindrops, and that's how the rainbow appears. But yes, I think the way you have it is probably a clearer way of putting that. You need sun's rays and the striking raindrops to create a rainbow. They're saying how rainbows actually form is the sun's rays strike the raindrop at exactly the right angle, and it's a prism, and therefore the rainbow is formed, which is like the cool property of water thing. That's what they're trying to get across there, but it is confusing. I understand why you changed it there. Yeah. All right, but that's not actually the run-on. That's just clarity of language. The run-on is later when it says you can produce a rainbow, you can see it if the sun is behind you. That's where we keep going. Okay, number 5. In drawings by young children, sizes and shapes of objects often look wrong. So it's a sentence, and just so you know, I would not have a comma after children there. I'm kind of a don't use commas person, but. All right. Okay. All right, number 6. The typical sonnet has 14 lines, 10 syllables making up each line. Anybody say it was a sentence?
I called it.
It's a sentence!
It is a sentence. So tricky. And the reason is 10 syllables making up each line is not an independent clause.
What do you call that?
A dependent clause.
What do you like with the making in it? Like the independent clause.
What do I call the independent clause?
No, like this type of dependent clause has an ing in it.
Oh, it's called a complex sentence. The type of it. So there's simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences have an independent clause, and then a dependent clause. And a dependent clause, in this case, the ing is a gerund,
But people
gerundial
often
clause.
use gerundials.
Yes. You can also have participial clauses to make 10 syllables up in each line will do that. And there are a few others as well. But, yeah. One more that you can do a full grammar book and you know. All right. So another tricky one, complex sentence there. Number 7, we spent hours looking for the car keys, which we never found, even after an intense search. Sentence or run on? Oh my God! I don't know. Be strong. Say it in a sentence. You're right. Yes. Very good. And again, that which is what's saving you there. Think about it. Which we never found, even after an intense search. Do you see how that's not independent? It can't stand alone, therefore it does not need to have a coordinating conjunction or semicolon. Number 8, they enjoyed a long afternoon of play. Afterwards, everyone ate an enormous dinner. Run on, good, yes. And the reason here is they are both independent clauses. Therefore, Mr. Johnson was right, comma slice minus 5 points. Right, exactly. So what you need to do there is have, they enjoyed a long afternoon of play, and afterwards, everyone ate an enormous dinner. Something like that. Or you can do 2 sentences, or you can use a semicolon. Number 9, I can hardly wait to jump into the waters of Lake Michigan, which looked so inviting on such a warm day. Sentence, yes. And again, that which is what's keeping it a dependent clause and allowing you to use just a comma there. Number 10, a stray dog wandered onto the field. The outfielder tried to catch it. Run on. Very good. And that one's pretty obvious. I would just do 2 sentences there, I think. The stray dog wandered onto the field, period. The outfielder tried to catch it. I'm sorry. noticing something else. All right, number 11. Although the evergreen was not in the direct sunlight, it seemed to endure. Sentence or direct opposite? Sentence. Very good. And according to plan, Joe rushed the receiver and the rest of the team stampeded the front line. Sentence. Right. Very good. And there's a lot of commas in there. Still. All right. So if you're still confused about that, turn to the next page. Because the next page is the part. What's that?
No.
Okay. There were a few people that couldn't make it today, because when I did the sign up, some people could make Monday and some people could make Wednesday. And then Monday I ended up being at the doctor's and I couldn't, so I switched it to today. Unless you also want to watch it in your spare time. Go over the paragraphs and stuff. If you want to, let me know and I'll get your copy. All right, so there are 4 types of sentences, and those 4 types will help you not lose all your points on your essays. There are simple sentences, subject and a verb, and a few adjectives or whatever. There are compound sentences, 2 sentences joined by this or this, 2 independent clauses. There's a complex sentence, which is an independent clause and a dependent clause, something that has a subject and a verb, but it can't stand alone. And then a compound complex sentence is when you have both of them. So, 5:15, right?
Yeah.
Trying
No,
to
I
decide
think it's 5 o'clock.
how many of them then would do. Yeah. All right. Hang in there. I know. It's like drinking from a fire hose. Have you heard that expression? Trying to get it all in your head at the same time. Yeah. Anyway. It does. It kind of makes you feel like you have a headache. Yeah. All right. Number 2. The following sentences are compound. Indicate how they should be punctuated by writing the word which comes before the comma, along with the comma or semicolon. All right. You don't have to write this down. We're just going to go over it out loud. So, Bethany, take number 1 for me. I love roses, but I'm allergic to them. What would you do there?
I think I would put
Exactly. That's exactly right. With the compound sentence, woohoo! All right. Well, I love roses, comma, but I am allergic to them. Do you see how I love roses? It's independent. Stands alone. I am allergic to them. Independent. Stands alone. So you have to have this. Or you can take out the but and just do this something. All right. Number 2. Either we use the typewriter or we will have to write all the words out by hand. That shows you how old this handout is. The typewriter. Sorry, girls, to interrupt. Come on, what would you do here? Yes, exactly. And again, you have 2 independent clauses there. All right, and then one more. Mary runs the hurdles, Sally does the high jump, Dora runs the mile. Oh, hey, come on, sit.
Yay, my sister!
Just stunned that you guys are related.
Why? You not think you like me?
Oh, I like all people, so you're fine. You're good.
You don't think you're right?
I think your personalities are like the antithesis of each other. Mm-hmm. You remind me of my husband, who's a twin, and my mom always. My husband is, but they look nothing alike. My husband is tall and incredibly good looking, and my brother-in-law is short and dark, not blonde, and one Luke when I met him was really tan and looking at those. But so he sort of looked like this beach guy, and my brother-in-law like does books in English, and he's really he's always inside. And my brother-in-law is a communist, and my husband's very conservative, and he's very athletic, and my brother-in-law doesn't like things. But anyway, you two remind me of them because it's like you guys are twins. You're just like opposites on everything.
Wait, we're not twins.
No, you're siblings though. You just remind me. You remind me of my brother-in-law, my husband, the 2 of you. just kind of fun. Yeah, makes me happy, because I like the way a lot. Obviously one more than the other, because I married one, I don't have to deal with that. Oh boy, moving on. All right. Anybody know how to deal with this number 3? Married? Yeah, you do, good.
I wouldn't do that comment.
Wait, hold on. For number 3, the Mary runs the hurdles one?
No, I'm looking at the wrong number.
You guys say you're looking at the wrong number 3. Yes, Ben, what would you do?
Semicolon, like in between each spot, like
Yes.
everyone's
Mary runs the hurdles, semicolon. Sally does the high jump, semicolon. Yes, yes, you can do that. What? Yeah, I know. If it's a list, but they're complete sentences, you don't use commas, you use semicolons. So.
Can you use a comma between hurdles and then the high jump and then put and or?
Yes, that would be another option. So Henry points out the other way. If you really, if that just freaks you out, you can't use that many semicolons. You can do Mary runs the hurdles, comma, Sally does the high jump, comma, and Dora runs the mile. And then you're just doing this option instead of this option. And you do not have to keep saying and. You can only say that once because it sounds stupid. Yeah.
How did Dora run a mile?
Do you know Dora?
How could she do that?
Because she's
Lots of
Dora the
people
I don't think we're on
Explorer.
the same page, like
They
Dora
can
the
do
Explorer.
I think Dora the Explorer could run a mile. She's very athletic.
I'm sure I'm
You're asking me if I know Dora the Explorer. Do you know what world I live in? All I do is watch Dora the Explorer and Mighty Machines on Netflix. That's all I get to watch. Oh man, by the way, the airplane episode of Mighty Machines is really cool. Anyway, and there's another very first one. They blow up 2 water towers, and it's pretty awesome. Sorry, I looked at my alarms on my phone. Alright, so anyway, run on. So let's look at number 3 now. These are complex containing adjective clauses. Woo! So here's where the fun begins. All the curtains that are hanging in the living room must be washed. Now, first of all, the rules have changed since this was published. Wow. We no longer put commas around the phrase they want you to put commas around, which is that are hanging in the living room. Short adjectival clauses no longer need commas if they're short, but some of them still do need clauses. So let's take a look at number 2. I went to Slippery Rock where they sell tennis balls cheaply. Where would you put the comma there? It's a complex sentence. It's not an independent clause. Where they sell tennis balls cheaply does not stand alone.
After rock.
After rock. So most clauses that begin with who or which or where are going to need commas. They tend to be independent clauses that are longer and need to have commas around them. So another rule of thumb that might save you some points. If you have a who, probably need to put commas around it. All right. So if I did a sentence like, Caroline and Elise, who were giggling throughout the writing seminar, went home and enjoyed dinner, there will be commas around who were giggling through the seminar. If it were at the end of the sentence, then you would just want like this one here. All right. There, next one. Here's an example of it. He gave the shopping list to Dad, who does not like to shop particularly. Okay, so who there needs a comma in front of it.
In market?
In front of who? Yes, very mediocre food, but I think
That's nice.
the food line of the selection was limited. Alrighty. Number 4 shows you following sentences are complex and contain adverb clauses. And again, sometimes you have to punctuate them and sometimes you do not. So let's look. We would like to go to the dog races as soon as he arrives. Yeah. And would anybody put any punctuation in it? Yeah. Good. You are correct. We used to punctuate around as soon as he arrives. We no longer do, so you got it right. After the class is over, we expect to swim in the pool. Any punctuation ideas there? No. Actually, yes. We still, good try though. After the class is over, comma. Most introductory clauses that are dependent, we still put commas around. The exception to that is really short ones, like after dinner, we are gonna burn the stack of paper, okay? Then you wouldn't have a comma then.
Why after?
Well, I just had to come up with some kind of introductory phrase. After seminar, comma, we're gonna burn all these papers. Yeah, please don't do it in front of me. Please wait till I leave the parking lot. Alrighty, the fire pit's in the farther. Alright.
If anyone was
Oh, you all know it's there, I see.
Yeah. No, we just have like, like we
I like this all the time. Go ahead. So what club were you part of?
What cult are you?
What were you saying, Joel? Tell me. No, Mia, I don't want it to know. Joel. I'm so sad. I'm sorry. Joel. I don't apologize for all. I enjoyed him immensely. Alrighty. Let's see here. Oh yes, number 5. Alright, now we have some fun. Next up, oh no, hold on. Alright, Henry, you're on for number 1 for 5. The girls ran as long as they could, but they could not finish the race. What kind of sentence is it, and where would you put the punctuation?
I put a comma after could.
You are correct. Do you know what kind of sentence it is? Simple, compound, complex? 25% chance of getting it right.
Compound.
Bingo, yes. Way to listen to Joel. Yeah, I know it. I saw you. Alright. Compound sentence. 2 independent clauses joined by a coordinated conjunction and a comma. Alright, number 2. Although she is a gifted student, she had difficulty with the test. So, Madeline. Sadly, no. Good try. It is a complex sentence. Thank you. Yes, because it has that. Well, think about it. Although she is a gifted student, is that a sentence? Can it stand alone? No, it can't. So that's what differentiates Madeline and everybody else. A compound sentence from a complex sentence. You have a part of it that doesn't go together. Sorry. We're just talking about dinner. And apparently we're grilling, so if you guys want to come burn your papers at our house, then you can come and grill. Alrighty. I know you actually could come in. You know, you guys all know I let Maggie burn her math pages after we're done, after I corrected them. She burns them. It's very satisfying. Alright. Oh, every now and then, if you're having a really bad day, just go out in the driveway and. Anyway, only one paper, don't do it all. Alright. Alrighty, so, although she was a gifted student, comma, she had difficulty with the test. Alright, that next page. Oh, 9 minutes away, there's more!
Are you okay?
No, he's not okay, but he's gonna make it. He's sure. Alright, let's look at number 5 on the next page. After the race, we left for Florida, where my sister lives all year. Anybody know what kind of sentence it is? Want to take a guess?
I know it's a comma.
Okay, where does it come go?
Right after the race.
Actually, you can put a comma there with the introductory phrase. You do not have to because it's so short, but you can. But there's another place to get a comma too. After Florida. Remember, who, which, where clauses, you always punctuate with commas. And where my sister lives all year is a dependent clause. Can't stand alone. So this is a complex sentence. Alright, let's see here. Number 7. Bear, what do you think? Our house, which is an old Victorian one, is near downtown and it is very convenient for shopping. What kind of sentence and where would you put the punctuation?
Complex.
You're half right. There is a complex where the dependent clauses, which is an old Victorian one, right? But what do we do with that end part? And it is very convenient for shopping. It's an added clause, independent clause with an and. Does anybody know what we do with this? It's the only example of number 4, compound complex sentence that we have. It has both There's a dependent clause plus 2 independent clauses. So, our house, comma, which is an old Victorian one, comma, is near downtown, comma, and it is very convenient for shopping. Whoa.
Whoa.
Alright.
You're gonna be telling everybody, you're gonna be like,
Alright, I'm trying to decide what I want to do for the last section.
are we gonna get through all these?
No, I knew we wouldn't. I'm just trying to decide.
We've got like,
Hey. Oh, welcome. I know, yeah, sorry, I'm taking up they're like, really? You're still going on? Okay. Turn to this variety page, I promise. This is the last thing we're going to do. Next time I'll bring monkeys and then it won't be quite so bad. Maybe parrots. Well, I brought my kids. Let's take
they were pretty good.
No, they were pretty good. If I'd had them back here, you know, giving something all the time would have been better.
Maybe you could have had them walk. You could have set the Star Wars movie and all this stuff.
Yeah, we almost
right
just watched
here.
Star Wars for 2 hours because my kids were being bad, and I was like, well, we could just all watch it.
You could have them do interview dance for us next time.
They're very good at interpretive dance. Excellent. But the problem is this floor because they like to throw themselves off furniture and do somersaults and that. They're very good at it, but it needs to be a little softer. I think some of the fractures still. Anyway, we're hoping for gymnastics scholarships. All right. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about today, besides understanding comma splices, which is so important, is sentence variety. And if you are really interested in this, behind this page, which we won't have a time to get to, I've given you a 6-page handout on the 25 sentence patterns in the English language. So exciting. Yes, I'm really excited about it. Anyway, but ultimately, here's the thing. All writers, remember how I talked about patterns, how you want to have your writing fit this pattern, why we love to tell stories, and why stories are so easy for us to write, because those are the patterns that we think in. And argumentative papers require a different pattern, which is why it's so hard for us. Although teenagers are very good at arguing, so I really don't know why that's always so hard for you guys. But there you go. That's how it is. That's true. Think about it that way. And then maybe your essays will be easier for you. Maybe you're writing against a sibling. But also your sentences.
sibling.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, did we sibling? Oh, sorry about your sibling. I hear you. Alrighty. You should do that, I suppose. Sibling.
I wouldn't know about siblings.
Siblings now. Alright, well pretend. It's good. It's easier to argue your sibling. It depends on the age of your sibling. If your sibling is Callum, it's really frustrating because you're like, Callum, do this, and you just say no. It doesn't matter. That's
Then
wrong.
when it's like a couple steps up, then it's like really easy, because then he's like, what? Okay.
Then you get into the slave mindset of, hey, go do that. And you're like, okay, right. But then after that, they start to, they're like,
Maybe not.
yeah, exactly. Then the argumentative comes in. I'll do this because you should do this because of this, and this. And that's how you can write your essays. But I digress. You also get into habits with your sentence patterns. Almost everyone begins sentences with subjects. And so this next one just talks a little bit about sentence variety. And here again is what I would recommend you do. Look at your essay quickly when it's done and just evaluate, did I begin all these sentences the same way? And if I did, let me change 1 or 2 of them. And it makes such a difference. So take a look here, things that you can shift to the front. Usually it literally is a matter of just clicking your cursor, cutting, and pasting to make your sentence variety different. All right, so it's really not hard. Look at number 1. The boys decided on the spur of the moment to go to Chicago. All right, nothing wrong with that sentence, but it does begin with the subject. So what's something that you could move to the beginning to change it? Yes?
On the spur of the moment.
Exactly. How easy is that? You don't even have to type out the words anymore. You don't even need your processors. All right. Number 2, the clowns dancing under a cloud of balloons made the children scream in hysterical delight. Again, that's a wonderful sentence. Nothing wrong with it. But if you've done a lot that way, how could you change it? Sorry. The deacon's wife and me is just monitoring. How would you change it if you wanted to? Carolina, what do you think?
I guess
that would be one thing. You could also move the whole end of the sentence. You could say, screaming in hysterical delight, the children looked at the clown. There's lots of things you could do, but all of them involve a Jared and moving it to the front. What is your page? Pardon? I didn't hear you, that's all. I wasn't going to say it. Yeah, it. Oh, I'm aware. It came out when I was young. The real it, not the new it.
Yeah, they like the new one.
Yeah, this is the new one. The old one was creepy too. I couldn't get through it, to be honest. It's that bad. Alrighty. Let me do one more here. Let's look at the very last one. He spoke to me in a kind voice and asked if I needed a place to stay until the storm ended and the roads were clear. How could you change that to not have the he as our subject beginning the sentence? You want to try again?
In a kind voice.
Yeah, or speaking to me in a kind voice. Either of those would be great. All right, so I think that gets the point across. Let me summarize in the last minute I have. Here are the things that I want you to remember. Remember the shape of this. This is what an argumentative essay looks like. Broad, narrow to a thesis. Repeat your thesis or reference your thesis multiple times in your column. Restate your thesis and your conclusion, and expand. Why does it matter? Why is it important? Remember that. Number 2, you need to have a coordinating conjunction and a comma between independent clauses or a semicolon. And semicolons are super fancy and make you look really intelligent. Use them more. I'm a strong supporter of the semicolon. I'm going to get a bumper sticker. And then number 3, put commas around who, which, and where clauses in your sentences. If you do those 3 things, even just those 3 things, I guarantee you your essay grades will go up probably 10%.
What's in Mr. Johnson's class would go like 5%?
Maybe 5%. Okay, but 5 left, so go up 10%. All right, so the only other thing I want to remind you of, and I would just like to know if there is any interest, you can send me an email or whatever. If you are interested in scheduling time to have someone go over an essay with you on a one-to-one basis, I want to know if there's even any interest in that, because I'm not going to go and figure out time in my schedule and all of that. It's tricky because it involves you thinking ahead. You actually have to do your work ahead of time. So you think about it, and if you think, yeah, that might be something, or ask your friends and classmates if it's something they might be interested in, and let me know if you think there's any interest. If there is, I'm going to try to figure out a way to schedule that. Yeah.
I can tell you right now, that'd be great for some essays for my college class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't care if it's for grade partners in college. It's just would be something that
I was going to say, it sounds really nice to do that every month, because that's like really often.
No, you wouldn't have to necessarily do it every month. Let me clarify. What I mean is try to say, hey, this Monday of every month, if you have something you want to go over, let me know, and I'll give you 10 minutes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The problem is my schedule's so limited that I can't do like every week, for example. Although I'm trying to scratch up other people, and then maybe we could have it weekly, and then it wouldn't need to be quite so formal. We could just drop in and say, hey, can you help me with this? You can always talk, and you guys are always welcome. All right, that's all. Thanks for your patience, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Remember, don't burn your papers in front of you.
Fair. Yeah.
Wait, would you like,
These are yours. They're yours to keep.